different industries, different professions have different kinds of payback. Some have, there's profit involved. The reward is financial. I would say a lot of times in like the social sector or nonprofit, the payback or the reward, it's like relational, and it's meaningful, that you feel like you really get to help a community and be with people in their highest moments, in their lowest moments.
Uncommon Creative, the Filmpac podcast.
All right, you guys, welcome to the podcast. Hey, today we have a very special guest. For those of you that don't know, I have an identical twin brother. We've known each other for 38 years, roommates and woommates.
Classic.
Sol, my brother, his name is Solomon. Sol, lifelong storyteller, by occupation, a pastor, minister, but really like the anchor of this whole interview, this whole podcast is really more about storytelling and the power of storytelling. Also, leadership, excellence, taking risks, being vulnerable, all those things, but it's really about storytelling, And actually, one thing that comes to mind right off the bat, and then I'm going to deep dive some questions with you, is I attribute at least part of my success or part of my journey into video and filmmaking was actually because of my brother. Now, this is kind of a wild story, and I'm going to give you just the basics of it. Maybe I'll deep dive this one too later. But my brother, twin brother, was selected. He won this contest to be on a book cover for an author. Her name is Karen Kingsbury. And so Saul, his face, our face was this character. And anyway, I saw that this author had done these book trailers that looked kind of like movie trailers. And I've always loved movie trailers. And keep in mind, at this point, I didn't have hardly any video experience. And we both were like, hey, let's make a trailer. And so we went out. This character was called Cody Coleman. And we kind of co-produced, co-directed this. I did all the technical stuff. Yep. We both, collaborated on the story side. And that was the start of my career. I sent it into this publisher, to the author. They loved it. They started hiring me. Then other publishers started hiring me. And I think I've explained some of the other story, in other podcasts. But so thank you for that. Thanks for being just strikingly good-looking dude to win that contest and allow me to start on that path. So
you are welcome.
So I remember even as kids, and certainly through our teenage years and early adulthood, you've always been a storyteller of all kinds. Maybe give me a little glimpse into what was some of those early influences that maybe contributed towards that.
Yeah. Well, part of it was I was a really committed student. I wanted to get A's. I wanted to please the teachers. I'm an Enneagram 3 achiever. I want to achieve, want to be approved of. And so 9th grade English, really tough class, tough teacher. She assigns this book, Jane Eyre, hard to read book, and I've got to write papers on it. But honestly, through that class, I learned how to read a story well. So really how to hear a story, which then influences how you can tell a story. It seems like that should be the first lesson for any storyteller, is to first learn to hear one or to read one. So through that class, learned how to read that book and others. And that kind of got me thinking through, how do I now communicate what I've heard to other people through story, and just kind of starting to sense the power of story.
Yeah, I feel like you've always done a good job of condensing down complex ideas and emotions into a few sentences or a short story. And it actually went beyond story. I mean, sometimes you guys don't know this, but Saul helped me get through school. I wasn't the best student, but he helped me. He would learn the math stuff, and then right before the test, he would teach me how to do it. And occasionally I would then outperform him on the test. But the ability to take something that's complex and explain it to someone who's a third grade so yeah, I feel like you've always done it.
Yeah, I think taking things that are complex and making them simple is a passion of mine. But then there's another step too, make it from simple to then memorable and powerful. So people, not just that they understand it, but they remember it and they keep thinking about it, and it haunts them in a good way, that there's a lesson behind these stories of these things we're learning. So yeah, making it complex to simple, simple to memorable is kind of what I am passionate about.
And that reminds me of that quote you've shared with me,
yes.
Which is,
yes, if you want someone to know the truth, tell them the truth. If you want someone to love the truth, tell them a story. And that's been so helpful for me in life, and especially in my work as a pastor, minister, public speaker, someone who teaches others to remember that. If you want someone to know the truth, tell them the truth. If you want them to love the truth, tell them a story.
And I think for all the filmmakers and creative professionals out there listening, and beyond, like, I think that concept, that principle goes so far beyond just authors, filmmakers, directors, like that. If you run a plumbing business, if you can tell your story well, that's going to impact your business in a mighty way. And so I think my encouragement, I guess, to anyone listening is like, learn how to tell a story. It doesn't matter what you're doing. As a parent, I mean, there's so many applications that story, the power of story can be so impactful.
Yeah, I mean, I think nursery rhymes are good. If from a parent's perspective, it's one thing to tell your kid don't lie. It's another thing to tell a nighttime bed story that they've heard 100 times, but it's teaching the power and the necessity of honesty and integrity. So yeah, the whole telling a story is a great skill to learn, whether you're a parent, a friend, a business owner, a technician, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of other maybe early moments that you had, in this storytelling journey. Is there anything else maybe that happened along the way?
I remember when I think I was 25. I was in grad school learning to become a Bible teacher and pastor, but still not sure if I'm actually good at this. And I was asked to speak at a middle school graduation, and I had been traveling, so I forgot about it until the day of, and I had to write this speech in like a few hours. And I wrote this speech. It was actually called Jesus is Better, talking about the life of Jesus and the example he sets for us. And it was like a 10-minute graduation speech for middle school. And I got such good feedback on it. And it was a really important moment for me. One, because I realized I can do stuff last second that can still work. And that kind of still haunts me.
Good skill to have.
Yeah, it's good and bad. But it also, on the one hand, there's probably some people who need to hear, like, don't listen to your own hype all the time. But there's some people who maybe struggle with confidence and like, am I good with this? And that's where I was at that moment. So to have these parents and whoever else there telling me that was the best graduation speech I've ever heard. That was the moment where I was like, okay, maybe I do have something here. Maybe I can move people with words and language and stories. And so that time, that was 2010, I was 25. That was an important early step for me as well.
I remember in 2008, you wrote kind of an interpreted story from the Bible about a character called Barabbas. And you wrote this script, and we put some music to it. And then I had this like vision for the video. Once again, this is before me knowing how to operate a camera. I literally borrowed the camera from my grandpa. A little digital high 8 tape camera, and like filmed this like vision I had in my head for this story. And then, so my brother and I, we used to, perform on stage, singer-songwriters, and we would show that video sometimes, and it had such an impact. And it was cool to combine those kind of story elements of, storytelling, the visual side, video, and how that kind of works together. And this was kind of abstract too, but that was kind of a big,
right.
I think, moment probably for both of us early on.
And there was music too. So it was a combination of video, music. It was a faith-based message. Yeah. It was me figuring out, like, I don't even know what it was. It wasn't really a poem, and it wasn't quite a story, and it wasn't long enough to be a sermon. It was kind of just this short, almost spoken word, or like a free verse sort of thing. But yeah, that was another big moment, I think, for me and for us, is to learn, there's a lot of creative options for us, and let's explore some different things that we could do together.
And that brings me to a point, and I don't want to sound like this is a soapbox, but it's more of an encouragement that just because someone is not a creative professional, it doesn't mean that they're not creative. I mean, I'm looking at you specifically, like, you wouldn't call yourself a creative professional. However, like that whole video and a lot of these other things that you'll talk about today and stories, like, you have a lot of creativity. It's not like it was like unprecedented. You're trailblazing. We're not copying and pasting things. You're like coming up. You're generating new ideas, new stories, new visions. So I guess that's just a good reminder to all of us out there. It's like, let's be creative. Let's not just copy, paste, and plagiarize. It's like, let's generate new stuff.
Well, and what's interesting too about when that story happened, I'm 23. my day job is I'm an accountant, which generally you don't think accountants are creatives, or if they get too creative, they're like in jail. Yeah. So I was an accountant, but in my evenings, I'd stay up super late, just kind of working, thinking, writing. I loved to write. So I'd like write these stories and short messages. Like that's the moment where this came from. So maybe another encouragement to people is even if you're like, maybe your day job isn't in the creative world like mine wasn't. But for me, that was a cool outlet to say, but I think I do have that part of my brain and I want to do that. And maybe I can bless other people with it. Maybe I can help them. Maybe I can inspire other people to be creative as well.
Yeah. Don't limit your own creativity. Like you got to let loose those inhibitions. It's vulnerable. It's hard, but it can be very rewarding. I remember when we were just young boys, our mom reading Chicken Soup for the Soul. So if you don't know, there's back in the 90s, and they're probably still producing them, but there was these books, little short stories, and they were so potent and emotional and shocking and surprising. Anyway, they were so good, and our mom used to read it to them. And I know that had an impact on me, and I know it had a great impact on you. Maybe you can tell me a little bit about how those years of those bedtime stories and stuff impacted your storytelling.
Well, I think maybe it's because of that, or I don't know what's the cause and effect, but I think I've always loved like short form stories. Like I love a good movie and a good book, but I think even more so like a song, 2 or 3 minutes, and these Chicken Soup for the Soul stories, they're short, they're bite sized, and there's something about that I always loved. And so yeah, I think probably indirectly those did shape me, and it shaped the way I tell stories, always looking for, is there an unexpected element here, or what is the emotional part of this story where I can connect from my heart to someone else's heart, which is really the only way to connect. I think those stories inspired me, inspired us. I think also the music we grew up listening to, a lot of R&B, hip hop, a lot of storytelling in those. And what I love about those is they're limited. They have 2 or 3 minutes to tell you this full length story. Now in hip hop, you got more than 200 words, but your average R&B song, you don't have that much time, but there's these stories behind it that you get to enter into the experience with the writer and what they're singing about. So I think Chicken Soup for the Soul, I think of Keith Sweat and R&B and Boyz and just Shy. I mean, all these artists that we listen to and were able to read as young boys, those really shaped us.
Yeah, and one thing, and I don't want to dog authors out there, but one thing I say is like, authors, you guys got 100,000 words to communicate your story, your point. 2 of my biggest passions are like filmmaking and songwriting. I've got about 150. 200 words, maybe. On the video side, sometimes it's no words, it's just visuals. And so I'm not saying that authors and, book writers are not creative. That is not what I'm saying. But there is a forced creativity in the way you think about how to tell a story. How do you illustrate something? How do you hit something home? All that in a short amount of time. It's really good exercise. And it's applied to my career as a filmmaker as well. I know it has to your career too.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of times, in my role as a pastor, I sometimes, on an average week, I have 30 minutes where I can talk to somebody, but I have to think about it in like 2 to 3 minute segments, because when I'm listening to someone else talk, I lose track about every 2 or 3 minutes. And so when I have a 30-minute message, that's really 10 3-minute messages that I'm giving people on ramps to jump back in with me. Here's the next point. Here's the next idea. Here's the next story. Here's a quote you should remember. And so I think some of those, again, back to those early shaping influences, those shaped how I tell stories, how I give messages, how I teach others.
Once again, Sol, I know you very well personally. I know that you've had to make a lot of sacrifices in a lot of realms of your life for your occupation, for your career. Maybe you could just tell me a little bit about those sacrifices you've had to make.
Yeah, I have made sacrifices and there has been hardships, but I think the first thing I would say to that question is that my list of blessings is longer than my list of sacrifices. Like my gratitude list far outweighs and outnumbers my sacrifice list. I stand on the shoulders of giants. There are family and friends and mentors and coaches along the way who have helped me. So when I hear the question of sacrifice, I'm like, in many ways, it's not a sacrifice. It's just me being a faithful steward of what I've been given and what's been entrusted to me. But if I was to think, what are some of the things I've sacrificed along the way? In a word, I think comfort is the sacrifice that I found. So much of my job is on the stage in the spotlight. And that, given my personality, that's actually not where I love to be. But for the sake of what I do, because I believe in it, that's something that even right now, this is not my most comfortable moment of the week. But I get to talk about things that I believe in and that I'm passionate about, and hopefully for the purpose of inspiring others. And so I think that's one discomfort, is stepping into those places of discomfort. So there's this great quote. It says, "You can be comfortable or courageous, but you can't be both." And that is something that has stuck in my head for a long time. And anytime I feel like kind of backing down or shirking back, I remember you can be comfortable or courageous, but you can't be both. You can never be both at the same time. And so I think for lots of creatives, really for lots of people just in life, to remember that your pain threshold is your success threshold. Your ability to tolerate pain and discomfort and awkwardness, that's your leadership ceiling. And so being willing to step into painful or awkward moments, I think, is what we all probably need a little more courage to do.
And I wanted to hit on the gratitude portion for a second, kind of how you introed that, because that should be profound, I think, for people. At least sometimes I get into the mindset of like, oh yeah, I'm just bootstrapped, came from nothing. Like, that's not the case, right? I mean, we didn't grow up billionaires or something, but like I had a loving family. I mean, parents, grandparents, siblings, cousins. Like I had opportunities given to me to, whether it's like athletics or other things. And all of that stuff built on top of each other has allowed me to, pursue different things in my life, music and film and entrepreneurship. And I'm just so grateful for that. And that kind of hit me in this past week. And I was actually talking to one of my employees this week, and I was saying, like, because of that, because I've stood on the shoulders of giants, I have such high expectations for myself and my performance that almost crippling sometimes, but like for now, it's good, healthy, just motivating me towards excellence and accomplishing something great. And I think that's something that I aspire to do, is like accomplish something great, but I need to maintain that mentality of gratitude.
Yeah, I think greatness, I've thought about that a lot. I think both of you kind of have that idea of like, I want to grasp that. I want to step into greatness. I don't always think, though, greatness means bigness. I often think greatness is doing the faithful thing, the thing that's right in front of me, Princess Anna doing the next right thing. Like that's actually greatness. It might be completely unseen, completely behind the scenes, known to maybe one person or zero people. But greatness is, I think, stepping into your calling, no matter how many people get to observe it or not, and doing the assignment that's out in front of you.
Yeah. One thing that came to mind, I didn't expect to say this, but like this past weekend, I was playing music. I was doing these little concerts, and for a bunch of kids, and I was getting all the hype, right? All the praise, just like, oh, Caleb's cool, and he, the playing with kids and all this, and then I was talking with another dad who has a special needs kid, and this dad is with his son the entire time, for 48, 72 hours straight, just, helping him through the stage, the basics of life. And I was just like, dude, you're the hero, man. Like you're doing the great thing. I'm just like, I'm getting all the, I almost felt like unfair. Like, dude, you're, and I told him that. I'm like, dude, you're it. Like, you got it made. He commented something about like his like fitness level, and he needs to get all that. And I'm like, dude, you already got it made, man. Like your heart is in the right place. Your whole worldview and perception of life and value and friendship and love is like, you got it made. So
yeah, that's gratitude. A beautiful story. Yeah, Jesus in the Bible tells a story of, there's a lot of these religious people dumping huge sums of money into the pot in front of everybody, and they're getting cheered on. And then there's this old widow woman who comes in, and she has like nothing. It's like the equivalent of like a couple pennies, and she drops it in, and paraphrasing, but basically says that is greatness. It's the thing that nobody is applauding, but it matters because she matters, and her sacrifice for the sake of others, that's what matters.
Yeah, I think like performing, or let's say, I would say, achieving greatness, sometimes it's behind the scenes. I think about my mom, for example. She used to, we did a lot of sports growing up, track, football, I was very into it, very intense. It kind of dominated our life for 20 years. My mom would go into these public bathrooms before our races and get on her knees in the toilet stalls, and she's a clean freak. She would get on her knees to pray for us. That's like greatness. In motherhood, no one sees that. The only people that know that are me and you, to, now more people, but like, that's greatness. Sometimes it's not the cheers and the crowds or the money and success and fame. It's just in the little things in life. That's where you can achieve greatness. And I think I need to remind myself of that.
Yeah. And you said sometimes that's greatness. I maybe even push back and say it's always. Yeah. Greatness is always the stuff nobody sees. Even the person who does a great job when the light's on them, when there's something that happened when they were behind the scenes, when they were preparing and practicing and going through pain and the awkward stuff when nobody is watching. That's actually where the greatness happened. The stage thing was just like, oh yeah, they already built that. They built that in secret, and now the world gets to see it too. So what happens is, not always does everybody's greatness get to be shown to the world, but greatness, I would say it's always the behind the scenes. It's always in the shadows.
Yeah, and for the creative professionals, listening out there, filmmakers, it's like sometimes the greatness is in the preparation. It's in the pre-production, the planning. The greatness manifested is in the movie, the film, the ad, the logo, the design, the website, whatever. So I think it's a good reminder to everyone out there. Speaking of greatness, I also think about failure, and specifically for us, my dad, he used to record everything on video. So I have a lot of failures documented very well in the sports world and beyond, musically as well. Tell me about like your biggest failure.
Yeah, I could list off several like moments. I mean, things that like in retrospect, I shouldn't have done that, or I messed that up. Like I shouldn't have sold my house right before the housing boom, or I really should have caught that game-winning pass that I dropped, and everybody was counting on me.
I remember that one.
Yeah, you do. And I remember when you all started and disqualified our whole relay team. So we all have these story. We have these failures I could look back on. I even think of there was a couple big, stage speaking moments that I had that were important moments that I really just did not deliver. And so we could unpack those. I think for me, when I think of biggest failure, it's probably not the things that I did that didn't go well, but probably the things I never even tried. It's that whole, you miss 100% of the shots you don't shoot. That's probably my miss over the course of my last 38 years of life, is like not taking enough shots, not speaking up for myself or speaking up for somebody else, not having that conversation, not raising my hand, not trying it out. Those are probably, when I think of my biggest failure, it's not like those one-off misses. I've learned from those. Those don't even feel like failures. They look like learning opportunities. But when I think of failure, I think, oh man, the things I didn't do, the risks I didn't take.
Yeah. It was not the action, it was the inaction. And I think that's the same for me. And I think, we get these ideas and inspiration to like do certain things, whether it's a business or so many different things. And we got to listen to that, and pursue it. And yeah, don't miss an opportunity.
Yeah. Take the shot, raise your hand, make the call, break the script, whatever it is. It's just, life is short. So, take that risk, take the shot.
And coming from two people who have failed a lot, some of my failures, a lot of them, I know a lot of yours, and I can tell you it's true for both of us that they're little, they're little learning lessons along the way. So let's get back to like the anchor of this podcast session, which is storytelling. Tell me, maybe in a few words, what you think makes an excellent story.
Yeah, I think whether it's in film or public speaking or music, I think the element of the unexpected is part of what makes a great story. So with me in public speaking, I try to do something unexpected in every message I give. Maybe I sit down for part of the I sit on the stage to like make a point, or I have a prop, or I ask them to do something right in the moment, to text a friend to say thank you. One time I was teaching there's this story in the Bible where Jesus is 10 and he's 12 and he's in the temple. So I had all the 12-year-olds in the audience raise their hand, and there were like 4 of them. And I talked to those 4 people amidst 1,000. I talked to those 4 for the next 5 minutes. So there's things like that people are like, oh, I didn't see that coming. I think great stories have that element, the element of the unexpected.
Yeah, agreed.
So there's power in the unexpected element of a story. I think another one is, in a word, it's maybe just virtue. Like there's something inspiring and meaningful. There's a lesson in the story. I think the best stories aren't just for entertainment, like, oh, that was nice, or that was interesting, or that was funny. Those things are all fine. But I think what makes the best stories is that there's an actual takeaway. This is inspiring me and inspiring us to be better, or to try something, or to take
change
a
our
risk.
thinking, change our perception on something.
Yeah, they're educational, they're emotional. It's bringing us into the story, and then as we walk away from the story, we're a changed person. We're a different person. I think the best stories do that. They surprise us with the unexpected, and then they change us. We walk away different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about like there's like mediocre, even good stories that are just kind of vanilla, kind of expected, and you walk away like, oh, that was fun, that was pleasant. But I agree that like excellent, what makes an excellent or a great story, or that's a much higher standard, much higher threshold. And yes, it's the element of surprise. It's virtue. It's changing how we think about something. And I think that's what a lot of filmmakers are after too. Generally, it's not just a story to be a story, a film to be a film. It's like they're wanting to communicate something. And those are good points.
I feel like that's one of the signs of a good movie is when you walk out of the theater or your living room, whatever it is, and you're like, you're almost like trying on, people laugh about this, but you're like trying on this new persona. Like, it's funny, but there's something that's good about that too. It's like, they got you. They got you with that story. You're like, no, I think I should become a slightly different person because of what I just saw in that superhero or whatever it was. It gives you courage. It gives you maybe a love for humanity that you didn't have 2 hours ago, but now you see the world a little differently and you have more compassion. So there's things like that I think, man, the best stories do that to us.
Yeah.
I saw a funny TikTok with that where somebody's like, they're like me leaving the theater with my new persona.
Yeah.
But it's funny, but I'm like, yeah, it's true though. Good stories do that.
Or similarly, when you're like listening to a good song in the car or whatever, and you kind of like all of a sudden you kind of slip into like, oh, I'm in this story. I'm in the music video, and you're like looking out the window, and you're like kind of extra dramatic. It's like it's really sucking you in. It's pulling you in.
Yeah. What was that song? The Ghostface Killer one, the dwelling on the past flashbacks when I was young. Whoever thought I'd have a baby girl, 3 sons. His story is crazy,
Yes.
Just brothers with muscular dystrophy. It's like his star at the bottom. Now we're here, sort of story, but it's still powerful.
Yeah.
I definitely get into that one.
Yeah, that's a good one. Snotty nose and no clothes.
All that I got is you.
Mary J.
Yeah.
Ah.
Solid. Classic. 90s R&B.
We're back.
Is there a better music genre?
There's not a better generation. No, that's it. So Sol, I know you got 4 kids, and something I always like to ask parents on the podcast is how do they balance career and family life? It's a very difficult balance to strike, and I'm curious what your take is on that balance.
Yeah, so I got 4 kids, 3, 5, 7, 9. It was really easy when they were 2, 4, 6, 8. I loved that. That was only about 6 months where I could say that. But so yeah, it is a balancing act. And in fact, I was encouraged. There's this book called Your Life in Rhythm, and it talks about the idea of rhythm over balance. Because if you're pursuing balance, it just feels like you're always out of balance, off balance. Like when I'm at work, right now, in this very moment, I'm not cultivating my relationship with my kids. So if I was going for balance, this would maybe throw me off. But with rhythm, it's like, no, there's a rhythm to the day. There's my 8 to 5, and then there's my evenings and mornings with family. There's a rhythm to the week, where weekends we're gonna have more time together. There's a rhythm to the year, where there's gonna be the summer season where there's more family time. So I think embracing the rhythm of life and the rhythm of family and work. I mean, there's rhythm all around us. There's inhale, exhale, right, left, the pendulum swing, day, night. And so embracing that in your life as well. I'm never going to be 100% focused on one or the other, but I can step right, step left. I'm going to be home and very present. And then I'm going to be at work and I'm going to be very present there. And so I think of it in terms of rhythm. But yes, to answer the question, how do you do that? How do you balance that? One of the things that has actually really helped me over the last year. So I think I saw it about a year ago on TikTok. The idea of the time travel principle. Have you heard of that?
Yes. Yep.
It goes like, all right, you're probably, hey parents with young kids, you're probably annoyed, frustrated, tired right now because there are fingerprints on every mirror and window. You're stepping on Legos.
This is all true.
You got the annoying cartoons blaring in the next room. There's messes. There's dirty diapers. There's all this stuff. There's chicken nuggets like for days. And you're like, it's fatiguing, it's tiring, sometimes it's annoying. But now fast forward 40 years. So I'm 38, so for me that's 78. Kids are out of the house and it's dead quiet and it's clean and there's no fingerprints, there's no cartoons blaring. It's like, and in that moment you have the opportunity to go back to that chaotic moment right now as 38-year-old me with 4 young kids. Would you take that moment? Would you take that time travel to go back? Every time. I imagine coming back to that moment, you're like, oh, this is actually really special. It's totally chaotic, but it gives me the mind frame to accept that and to be happy and thankful for that. Yeah, that I have these 4 kids. What a blessing to have them all in my house. They won't be in the house forever, but I have this special season, 15 more years, maybe, that I'll have them in the house with me. And so I want to make the most of that.
And one thing you said about rhythm and balance, as you were talking, the idea of a bike came to mind. Like, have you ever tried to balance on a bike when it's not moving? It's like, oh, too far this way, that way. What you need is like you infuse rhythm into that, and like the pedal and forward motion, and then it's like that kind of balance. It becomes a little bit more intuitive, and I think that probably applies also to like overall life balance. There's a rhythm to it. There's a motion and movement forward that kind of helps achieve the balance.
Yeah, and you're never going to get it perfect too. I think I'm still learning as a parent. So to even talk about parenting, it's like, dude, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to love my kids hard. Like I don't know. But what I try to tell myself and to other young parents who are even younger than me in parenting is just to like, take it easy on yourself. Like, love them well, and then just give yourself a lot of grace, because you won't get the whole balance, even rhythm. You won't get it right. Nobody ever gets it 100% right. But you pray and try to do your best that you're going to raise healthy, mature kids who help their community. And so that's another thing I would say is just to go easy on yourself.
Yeah. What's interesting, like I get emotional about some things, but I feel like I maybe went 10 years, I don't know, without like really giving a good cry. Like maybe age like 17 to 27 maybe. I remember when Eli was born, he got put in my arms. I'm just like a mess, Yeah. And now anytime I tell stories about my kids specifically, it's just they always get me. I just like can't finish, can't do it. Even just a couple of weeks ago, I had a graduation party at my house for my niece. And as soon as I gathered everyone in my living room, because I like to like affirm people and have people like, give them words of encouragement and all that. And I started talking. I'm like, oh boy, here the frog is crawling up my throat and I can't get it out. So I had everyone else go first, and I tried to get it out at the end. But yeah, it's okay. It's like, I think also to the girls, but specifically to the dudes out there, like, it's okay to cry. You can be a little emo sometimes. It's good, It's like it shows some vulnerability, and it shows like you're a real person. You're not a robot. We're not robots here yet. So
yeah, you should always, I heard a quote. It was like, you should always, it's like, take heed of the old man who never laughs or never cries. It's something like that. I can't remember exactly how the quote goes, but it's like, if you can't laugh and can't cry, there's something, I don't want to be mean. It's not, there's something wrong with you, but there's something that you probably need to inspect. You need to figure out why won't you laugh? Why won't you cry? I mean, you need to talk to somebody about that. Yeah, there's something going on. One of my favorite party tricks, I think you do this too, but party trick sounds kind of shallow, but when it's somebody's birthday or a going away party, whatever it is, every time I say, okay, we're all going to gather up. The way I do it, maybe it's different than you, is I say, share your first memory of that person and then share one word to describe them, because it just makes it a little more tangible rather than just like say something nice about them. It's like first memory, you know. It's like, okay, I can think back to that. Everybody kind of has that. And then the one word, which what's nice about one word is they say the one word and then they explain it.
So it kind of,
but it gives them like a category to not just
yeah. One way that I kind of start to achieve balance, I feel like with my kids and within parenting, is sometimes I have opportunities to bring my kids on set or in office, and they actually can help me with stuff. So like kind of bringing them along. And I know that that's kind of something you've talked about. Like maybe tell me a little bit about that, how you can maybe include your kids into your life.
Yes. Bring alongs and show hows. That's how I think about it. The bring along, I mean, whether it's a work trip or going to visit somebody, or even if it's a trip to the Home Depot, just like I'm going to go do something, I'd love to have a buddy with me. And that might be, well, hopefully it's my daughter, one of my daughters, my son, my wife, bringing people along to show them what we do. So then the second part is show hows. It's like when I'm working on something creative, let's say, and my son asks me like, well, what are you doing? I got a couple options. I could just be like, you wouldn't understand, like give me 5 more minutes and then I'll come, But I think another option and a better option is like to try to explain what I'm doing. Because if I can explain it to my 9-year-old, chances are I can probably explain it even better to somebody else. Or if I can't explain it to him, then I don't even know what I'm doing. So there's something about kids being able to explain it to them so they can understand it. And then the extra benefit is they'll give you unfiltered feedback loop of like, that doesn't make sense, or that's boring, or what if you did this instead? And it's actually, there's this kind of creative genius that kids have. And I know you've talked about that before. And so I love to tap into that. Like, I think you can help me with this actually, with the simplicity of what you might see in what I'm doing, or the lack of simplicity. It actually makes me better. So bring-alongs and show-hows are a way that I try to integrate work and family, is like when I can, and I can't always, but when I can, bring somebody along. When I can, show them how or show them what I'm doing.
During COVID, the whole filmmaking industry was like shut down or paused for a while. And I was very limited on what I could do filming wise and stuff. So one day I was like, hey, Eli, my son, hey, let's go out, let's go film some stuff. And we got all these shots, him swinging on this swing and all kinds of things, hiking up this mountain. And at the end of it, I'm like done, I'm tired. And I'm like, all right, let's go home. He's, no, I want to do this shot where I put on these like pilot goggles and his hat and do this thing. And I'm like, all right, fine. Like, okay, let's get it. It was the best shot of the whole shoot. It's one of our featured shots, popular on Filmpac. And I'm like, dang, like I almost missed that. And my son and my daughter, they're critical and encouraging, but they give me, they're just honest about whether it's a video. I'll show them some of my little social media videos. And if they're like, oh, that's cool, let me watch it again. I'm like, I'm on the right track. If I show them a song and they walk out of the room after the first chorus, I'm like, let's rework that. Because they're just so honest. My adult friends will just kind of be pleasant and nice. Like, oh, that was nice, but not Eli, not Mercy. They'll be like, stop. I don't like that one. I love that honesty.
Yeah, I think the people in my church, the people I get to lead, I think they all know all my kids' names, because I include stories about my kids in so many of my messages. And it's amazing to think about all the different ways that kids show us about ourselves. They show us about the world. I think of a time where one of my favorite stories about my son is he got really sick, lost his voice. And then I was putting him to sleep that night. And he was like, when I get my voice back, I'm going to tell Mom how great she is. Because Lizzie is the one who was taking care of him all day while he was sick. And I was at work. And I just loved that. I was like, that is what our voice is supposed to do. Like, we're supposed to honor people who bless us. And so I've now shared that story with lots of different people to realize, hey, like, yeah, when you get your voice back, you have a voice. You have an ability to honor and bless and uplift someone with your words. So do it. Take a lesson from the lesson book of my 4-year-old who understands something that we often forget. Yeah. When somebody helps you, honor them with your words.
That's good. I see the fear of failure hold back a lot of people, myself included, at least in the past. I try to push through that now. Maybe you could tell me about how you embrace the fear of failure, or how you overcome it.
Well, I think it's both of those, because there's like this balance of there is like a healthy kind of fear where it's like I don't want to fail, and so I want to try hard and be clear about this and do a good job with this. But you want a little bit of fear, but not so much fear that you're just unwilling to try, or you're just hedging everything so that it can't really take off and succeed. So I think there is a healthy amount of a fear of failure that actually helps us succeed in what we're doing.
And kind of going back to what you said earlier, like the biggest fear for me is not trying. Like that's the failure, and that's the fear that I won't try the thing, that it'll be inaction or I'll be too scared. It's not that when the failure actually happens, I'm like horrified. Like I can usually deal with that. It's like the regret of not doing it. That's what actually is scary. That's what haunts you.
Yeah. Failure, if you let it, failure can be like the master teacher. It's like that when you're in the rubble of your mistakes and the dust and the ashes of like, oh man, I really screwed that up. That is, that's the best place to learn. Arguably, that's the only place to learn, but I would say it's at least the best place to learn. And so I think to embrace failure, to have a healthy view of it, to know we can't avoid it. There's a little fear that's going to always be there, but then when it happens, to say, all right, I'm going to learn from this experience and get better because of it.
On the other side of failure, sometimes I worry, like, what if I'm good at something that maybe I really wasn't made for?
Yeah, that reminds me of this old quote by William Carey, and he used to say, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter, which I've always taken to mean, yeah, there's things that I might be good at, but they don't really help others. They don't really last. And so we want to be great and really focus on the things that we're called to do, the things that are right in front of us, the path that is out there for us. We want to find that path and then succeed in that path, even if it means failure along the way. It's better to fail while we're pursuing the right things rather than succeed at things that just don't really matter.
Yes. I've never quite been a great reader. I know that you are, and you're constantly reading. Maybe you could share something that's like made an impact on you recently.
Yeah, there's always a stack of books next to my bed, and I can just pick whatever I feel like reading that night. But the one I've been reading recently, it's a book called American Steel, written by our track coach at the University of Oregon, Dan Steele. And the whole story is crazy. His life is crazy, which I know you know some of the stories of that. But he talks about the story of he was primarily a track athlete, but he learned with his twin brother, Darren, they basically learned how to become bobsledders, and all the crazy sport that is and how scary it is. And so it's really an amazing story about their chase to get an Olympic medal, which I won't spoil it for you, but maybe they got one.
I believe he even suggested that for us at one point. He was like, bobsledding, like, you guys are big, you're strong, got big, strong thighs, like you could be a bobsledder. I'm like, no thanks.
Yeah. Well, speaking of failure, he actually has an interesting kind of anecdote in that book where it was one of his first times bobsledding, learning how to do that. They go crazy speeds down these steep, just ice tracks. I mean, just scary. And he fell, their bobsled, it tipped over. And when you crash on a bobsled, I mean, it can be possibly lethal injury. I mean, it can be really bad. And, he's just so scared. But his coach immediately had him go back to the start and try it again right away. Because if you get in your head about it, like, oh, I fell, or we crashed, I'm always going to crash, that'll just mess up your ability to push hard at the start of the race, which you need to do to finish well. So it's like within an hour of this like almost lethal crash, he's back in the back of the bobsled, getting back down this track, going 80 miles an hour. And so I think that the lesson there is, even when you fail, you got to be resilient. You got to get back up and step into it. It's the quarterback who throws an interception. The way to fix it isn't to sit on the bench. The way to fix it is to go back out there, throw it again, see what happens.
And it goes way beyond sports. I mean, we're talking sports, but like it goes every industry. You're starting a business, you're pursuing a music career, whatever it is, like there's going to be so many failures and seemingly catastrophic type of failures. You got to get back up, pick the camera back up, pick your guitar back up, pick the mic back up, and like try again.
Yeah, I was teaching my son to ride a bike just a few days ago. And it was right after I read that story. It was the next day. And he crashed pretty hard. And when you're learning how to ride a bike, you don't want to. It was the same idea. I had that story in my head, so I didn't even give him time to cry or look at his skinned up knees. I put him on the bike and I gave him a shove so that he could start pedaling again. And he's doing great with biking, by the way.
Good. Another question I really like to ask anyone on this podcast is, what would you tell your younger self, maybe your 25-year-old self?
Yeah. Drink more water.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Don't sell your first house. Get a life coach or a counselor or both. I think those are specific things, but on a big picture level, I would say this, because I'm now 13 years removed from 25-year-old me. I think my miss as a 25-year-old was trying to do too much, like trying to integrate all these new things and New Year's resolutions all the time. I want to get better. I think I used to underestimate what I could do in a decade, but I would overestimate what I could do in a year. So I think if I could speak to my 25-year-old self, it'd be like, add in one new healthy habit per year. Don't try to slam like 12 into 1 year. Add one new thing in each year, and you'll probably be better as a 38-year-old, drinking water being the primary one. Yeah. But that's something I would say to my 25-year-old self. I think another big picture piece of advice I would give to 25-year-old me is don't wait for the perfect conditions to do the thing that you kind of want to do.
It's never going to come.
Yeah, it's not going to come. The stars are never going to align. The timing's never going to be great. You're never going to feel 100% before you start that routine of jogging or whatever it is. Don't wait for January 1st. Don't wait for the girl to come along. Don't wait for those moments that, maybe when that happens, then I'll start. Start now. Like start today, start tomorrow, or if you can, literally right now, press pause on the podcast and start doing the thing that you kind of need to start doing.
And I don't want to get on too much of a soapbox here, but one thing I used to kind of explain that concept to people in terms of parenting and actually fostering and adopting, where my wife and I, we were foster parents for a while. We are now adoptive parents, and so a lot of our friends and community, they'd be like, I want to be a foster parent, down the road, maybe my kids are older. And I would always kind of push back and be like, I think the time is now. If you're waiting for the stars to align, you're going to be waiting into eternity. If you have that like inclination and that heart to do something, whether it's fostering a child, adopting a child, starting a business, whatever it is, creating a new habit, a new healthy health and fitness habit, nutrition, whatever the thing is, it's got to start now. Don't wait till January 1st of the next year. Do it now.
I know that's one of my pieces of advice I get to myself and also to others is like, when people, it's like December 15th and they start thinking of the things they want to start January 1st. If you don't start it December 15th, there's actually been research on it. Like once you have the idea of the New Year's resolution, that's when you have to start it. You can't wait because then January 1st, by the way, is the worst time to start a new habit because you're still kind of in vacation mode and things are still closed. It's the worst time to start. But when you have the idea, do it. I think learning to embrace the different moments that we're in is something that I have learned and I keep learning. One of my favorite quotes on this topic is, I think you've heard it. The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is right now. Yep. And so I think of all these things like, man, I wish I would have done that, like made that investment 10 years ago or started that, that TikTok account, whatever it was. I wish I would have done that 5 years ago. Okay. Yeah. 20 years ago, think about a tree. Like those things take time. Best time was 20, maybe 100 years ago. But the next best time is right now, right? When you realize that you coulda, shoulda done it then, well, now you have an opportunity to do it right now.
I feel like you have an interesting perspective on, the creative industry, filmmaking, creative professionals, all of that, creative work and digital art and whatever you want to call it. You don't have necessarily like the technical knowledge of the software and the gear and all that, but you have like really good, I feel like, instincts on like the big picture. So like maybe what advice would you then give to filmmakers and creative professionals?
Yeah. I think before giving any piece of advice, I would maybe want to give a word of affirmation to the creatives among us and just to say thank you, because in my dip into creative outlets, I found it takes a lot of courage to experiment, to try, to trailblaze, and to risk. And so just to say thank you to the creatives for doing what they do and taking all those risks. There's an author who just recently passed away, and he was a pastor too. His name is Tim Keller, and he talked about beauty as a form of resistance. And what he meant by that is there's so much brokenness in the world that we have to keep exposing ourselves to beautiful things so that we don't get disillusioned and depressed by everything bad that's going on around us. And I think we have artists to thank for that, for giving us beauty to help dispel some of the brokenness that's in the world. So that would be my first word to the creatives, just to say thank you. But a word of advice, something that I'm learning in my own field, is that I have some perfectionist tendencies. I want things to be great and thorough and just really not just well done, but actually world class. And so something that my boss told me, my previous boss, he said, you can't crush it on everything. So you got to think in at least 3 categories. And there's probably more, but the 3 he gave me was world class, well done, and good enough. Very few things in your life, very few projects, very few sectors of your life actually deserve like world class effort. Maybe 1%. There's a few more things that maybe deserve to be really, really well done. Maybe there's a certain project or an aspect of your business, your administration or communication, whatever it might be that needs to be well done. But there is a ton of stuff that really only needs to be good enough. And I know even hearing that is like anathema to the average artist. But yeah, just good enough is all you need for some things. Some things need to be, or I would say very few things need to be world class. A lot of things should be well done, but almost everything is just needs to be good enough. So having those categories have been helpful for me in my creative process, but also in my work as a pastor and a minister, is to know that not everything is going to get world-class effort. And that's what I have to give.
I was super thankful for my education and college experience. But maybe one thing I would say is that it kind of, the skills and the trades and the classes I learned kind of pushed me, and I think you too, towards how you can make the most money, but not necessarily how you can make the most impact. And I feel like both of us have maybe, you more than me, but kind of chosen like, hey, how can we make just a bigger impact and not necessarily chase the money? Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that's been applied in your career.
Yeah, I think different industries, different professions have different kinds of payback. Some jobs are really flexible, so you have lots of time off, and that's kind of the reward. Some have, there's profit involved, and so the reward is financial. But some, especially I would say a lot of times in like the social sector or nonprofit, the payback or the reward, it's like relational. And it's meaningful that you feel like you really get to help a community and teach people and be with people in their highest moments, in their lowest moments, and really make a difference in people's lives. And so that's one of the things I've loved about my profession is even if there's not the same kind of profit that a business would have, that we have really a different kind of profit. We get to invest in people and help people.
Well, I kind of look at it too, like it's a different kind of currency we're actually chasing. There's the dollar, right? Dollars that we're chasing, but there's also this other currency. It's friendship and like love and relationships, and that's arguably much more valuable than anything you can ever chase in terms of financial. And so it seems to me like you've chosen that. You've chosen to like chase a different kind of currency, and I think that's really honorable. Just this week on Monday, I had a shoot with a model, and she had told me that she had just started modeling, and she was so talented. And I was kind of digging in a little bit of her past, and I was like, oh, she was a college basketball player, and I was like, oh, it just clicked for me. Like, you've been performing your entire life. You've been vulnerable. You've put yourself out there. You've had to work hard. You've had to, when the light turns green, you got to turn it on. And she's been doing that her entire life. So when it comes to her career now as a model, actor, she's already 90% of the way there. And I think that when I look back on my life, our life, sports, now I think there's a lot of ways you can experience, and get that kind of practice of performing and kind of, that vulnerability, all of that. But for us, I know that's been a big part of my story. I feel like I've been performing in some way or another for many, many years, maybe since 6th grade, right? From the football field to the stage and now on set. Behind camera, though, it's still a performance. And I think, I guess for you, maybe how do you see that impacting your performing?
Yeah, I think the value, I learned a couple things from playing sports, and I learned it from other places too. Even school did this to an extent. But pressure and preparation, I feel like those are things that I learned in sports. Like you learn to prepare well. You start in the summer, you start practicing, you lift weights, you learn the drills, you learn the plays, so that in the moment when the pressure is on, I've already been there. I'm ready for this. And so I think in my life now as a pastor and public speaker and different things, it's like I know how to prepare. I know I've learned those skills over 20, 30 plus years now. And so then when the pressure comes, I'm ready for it and I can step into the moment. And it's always a little bit scary, but it's not prohibitively scary because I've done it before. It's not completely new territory. So I would say that's something I learned from sports, in addition to just being able to throw and catch a ball, is actually learn the value of preparation and how to walk steady even under pressure.
And I don't want us to come across as like jockey meatheads here. Like I think that there's a lot of ways to get this experience, whether it's in theater, or you could be a chess champion. I think there's the same kind of preparation, pressure, performance that happens there too. It's really achieving, trying to pursue excellence the entire time.
Yeah. For me, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I was an A student and I worked really hard. Actually, not A. I was trying to go A+. I was like trying for the teacher to love me and respect me, and for like, we're going to get an A+ here. Yeah. But that possibly even more than my, years in athletics prepared me for what I'm doing now was the time in the classroom and learning to read and write so that when the pressure of the test came or the paper came, I was ready for it. So yeah, you can get it from anywhere, from sports, from drama, from school. But learning to prepare and then perform under pressure is a valuable skill no matter what you're doing.
As identical twin brothers, I know we've always been compared. And I think that can bleed into, people's professional lives as well. Not that you have a twin brother, but you're comparing yourself against the other director, the other filmmaker, the other photographer, the other pastor, preacher, whatever. And it can be such a joy stealer. And I think it should be more of like comparison to spur you on and inspire you. And I feel like somehow we were able to kind of strike that balance in our adolescence. How do you take that on?
There's this old quote that says, if I lift you and you lift me, then together we fly. And I feel like that's something I've thought about a lot when I feel that rise of like rivalry and comparison, I try to like actively go the other way and be like, actually, I'm feeling threatened by that person, so I want to lift them up. And maybe in response, and it's up to them, but they can lift me up too, and together we can fly. So being able to learn from each other, to encourage each other, to share trade secrets or whatever it is, I think that is so helpful. It's good for the world and it's good for us as we're both trying to improve our craft and get better.
Sol, I know you love quotes, as do I. Maybe you could share with me a couple of quotes that have made an impact in your life in the past, year or two.
Yeah, I first heard this one from a guy named B.J. Thompson, and he says, sometimes you have to leave your hometown to discover who you were made to be, which I know resonates with me and with you because both of us have in the past several years left our hometown. And I found that to be true, that there's something about getting out of the known, getting out of the comfort, having to kind of restart, not necessarily reinvent yourself, but at least develop a new community, learn where things are. There's something about that process of literally leaving your hometown that helps you step into your calling and what you're supposed to do as a person.
Yeah, I think for me, I've over the past couple of years, leaving my hometown, I've really discovered, what things I didn't know about myself. I kind of unearthed like, oh, I'm actually good at this and I'm not good at this, and that needs attention. And it's been a really helpful experience. And I had some resistance at the start, but now I've been I'm just super thankful that kind of transition has happened, and it's really changed me.
Yeah, speaking of your hometown, I've been gone for the last 6 years from my hometown. Just moved back 3 weeks ago, which reminds me of another quote. It's by an old Greek philosopher, and he says, no man ever steps in the same river twice, because the river is never the same and neither is the man. And that's how I feel when I step back into Eugene, Oregon, my hometown. The river is not the same. Eugene's not the same as it was 6 years ago when I left. And for sure, neither am I. I've learned, I've grown, our family has grown. So the river is never the same, neither is the man.
All right. And I know you love sweets and cookies and fortune cookies. Tell me, what's like maybe one of the more impactful fortune cookie quotes that you've found?
Yeah, a few years ago, I was trying to think about kind of my next step. Like what should I do next? And I had this idea of going back to my hometown to start a church, which had been in my heart for a long time, but wasn't sure if that's what I should really do, but it kept coming back to me. And so I read this quote, this fortune cookie. It stopped me in my tracks. I remember it was in Waldport on the Oregon coast, this just kind of hole in the wall Chinese place. And opened up the fortune cookie, and it said, pay attention to the dream that keeps coming back to you, because that is your destiny. And I kind of knew immediately, like, oh, I know what that is. I'm not sure this is God talking to me or what, but I know what I'm supposed to do. And it doesn't mean I still wrestled with it a little bit, because that's what I do. But that fortune cookie, oddly enough, was really helpful for me. At least it gave language to what I was sensing in my heart. Like, that is the thing that keeps coming back. That is the dream that keeps coming back to me. So maybe, just maybe, that is my destiny.
Yeah. One big thing that I harp on in our industry, specifically with filmmakers, creative professionals, and specifically young ones, is like, hey, communicate with your clients well. And you don't just communicate and do it fast and do it kind. Like, you have to interpret a little bit of what's being said. Do you have any insight into that philosophy?
Yeah, a couple things. One is in emails specifically. What I've always been told and thought is read your own emails with like the worst possible tone. Like, what is the worst way that could be interpreted? Because it might get interpreted that way. And then for emails that you're receiving, to read them in the best possible way. Like, what's the best possible tone? Read them as if that person is smiling back. You want to give other people the benefit of the doubt, but you actually don't get to give yourself the benefit of the doubt to read yours in a tough way. So I think that's one important kind of communication lesson, especially digital communication when they can't see your face. But another thing that I think often about is, and this is true for marriage, parenting, friendship, leadership, business, is don't react to what people say. Respond to what they mean. Because sometimes people don't have the right words, or they're caught up in the emotion of something, and oftentimes rightly so. And so they don't always say it right. And so don't hold them to that. Say, okay, there's something probably true and real and meaningful behind this, and it's your job to try to take the best of that. And what did they mean by that? They said always. They don't mean always. Yeah. They said never, but they don't mean never. They mean not enough. So I think learning to not just react to what people say, but respond to what they mean. That's an important communication lesson.
My business partner, Jordan, he once told me we were dealing with some kind of personnel issues and some complaints and whatever. And he said, the thing is usually not the thing. Meaning, like, the thing that's being communicated, it's usually not the thing that's actually causing the problem. There's something else. You got to like dig a little bit deeper. And that's kind of what that quote is saying as well.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like in our world, in our industry, I always feel rushed, always. And sometimes I just have to like take a breath and be like, I need to budget some time for this. Otherwise, I'm going to rush myself to failure. Do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, somebody once told me, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And I don't remember where I first heard that. I know it might have been my military friend. It might have been from a movie. I'm not sure, but slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And that reminds me to do things well the first time, because that's the whole slow is smooth. Doing it, having to go back and re-edit a project or redo something, that's usually going to take a lot more time. So it's just a reminder to slow down, take a breath. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast.
We have a business where we make videos together for churches to use. I know that both of us have always had this desire to create art and work that honors God. And that's what started Ripe, which is our, video, kind of storytelling business. I guess maybe from your perspective, like, what was the origin of Ripe?
I think that one of the first videos that we did together, maybe the first video, it was a short story that I wrote that kind of had an application about the gospel and this character in the Bible named Barabbas. And so we I put together a little script, and then a friend of ours put some music behind it, and then you put a video to it. And that actually got a lot of shares, a lot of watches, and something we didn't expect. Neither of us really knew what we were doing. We were just kind of expressing some sort of creative outlet. But I think what we realized there is there's something there. There's a need there. And it seems like Christians or church people are resonating with kind of this artistic word with music and the video all together in one. So that was kind of the origin of Ripe. There were a couple others too. There was a couple clips of sermons that I preached actually, where you listen to my preaching, and you're good at identifying. I think that 2 or 3 minute segment would work well as its own kind of standalone video. And so there's the story of your adopted daughter, Mercy.
Yep.
There's the clip from one of the sermons I did about the power of words, that both of those can kind of stand alone and tell a powerful story.
Yeah, and we put the power of words. We just called that video "Words." We kind of put it out into the world and got a lot of traction. And so we're like, hey, there's something here. Mm-hmm. So we really dove into that.
Yeah, one of my pastor friends, the way he talks about a church service is like a meal, and there's the meat and potatoes and the salad and the breath mint. But what he said is actually the videos in a church service is the dessert.
Nice.
It's like the sweet spot. You can't fill up on dessert. You need a little more than that. But man, that really kind of it's the cherry on top for what a church service can be. And so that's what Ripe is trying to help churches do, is like, here's some dessert. Here's something that might make your service just a little more inspiring or a little more exciting. It might add a different story element that you didn't have before it.
It makes me think back to like elementary school when the teacher would roll in either the film projector when I was like really young, but the TV that was like on the stand, like strapped down, the big tube TV. He'd pull in, it's like, yes, dessert time, Yeah. Love my teachers, all the students, everything was great. Learn about Oregon Trail, all that. But they roll that TV in, you're about to be entertained. It's just, it's fun and it's impactful too. Story, all of that.
And it recognizes that there's different kinds of learners too. Not everybody can learn best from just a monologue from one person. Some people need a dialogue. Some people learn the most at recess. Some people, and I would say most or all people, really enjoy the video element where there's the music, words, and the visual all together at once, and it creates a new kind of a learning environment that can inspire you in a different way. So you're the one who actually came up with the name for this business, Ripe. Yeah. So why don't you tell us where that came from? Because I actually had to ask you, what is Ripe and why is it spelled with a Y? So what's the story?
Well, in the Bible, there's a lot of talk about, fruit in a tree bearing good fruit. And I thought about that as an application to churches, that maybe they don't need to grow an orchard. They don't need to tend to a tree. If I can pick a fruit, an apple that's already ripe, like, here you go. This is a finished product. This is ready to consume. That's a good thing. And so I kind of applied that to the video. It's like, hey, I'm going to make this video that this is ready to insert into a sermon, into a church service, into a youth group, whatever the situation is. And so that was kind of the origin of the name Ripe. I've always loved branding and logo, all that kind of stuff, and that just made so much sense to me. And so I was like, hey, let's roll with that.
Yeah, some churches have the size and capacity to they have a videographer on staff, or they have the money to be able to hire a freelancer to make a great video for them. 95% of churches don't. And so it's either no videos, or they'll do something like Ripe and have the ripe fruit given to them. Say, hey, here's something at a very reasonable cost, but you can show to your congregation and educate them or bless them in a different kind of way.
Obviously I'm in film. I love videos. I love making videos. I think, we can tell a lot of stories. We can learn a lot through videos. Maybe your perspective on why should churches use video? Why should churches use media, to impact their church? I
think it's common to say, the next generation, that's all, it's video, that's all they're doing. And I think there's probably some truth to that too. There is a lot of video. And so learning to communicate in a form that they're very fluent in is a good strategy of ministry. But I actually think videos connect with all ages. And so I think to show a great video in a service it's another way to learn. There's different things happening in your average church service, from communion to baptism to the fellowship in the lobby to the sermon, times of prayer or offering. But a video is just another way to teach people, to connect them with God, to connect them with each other, to inspire them, to give them something beautiful and interesting to watch. It kind of breaks up the service in a different way. So those are just a few reasons why I think videos can be really beneficial for churches.
And yeah, I know early on, I think I was like in my early 20s, there was a pastor that told me one of his main goals was to redeem the arts for the sake of the gospel. And that always stuck with me. I was like, yeah, we should be pursuing excellence in everything, but like video, multimedia, music and worship, storytelling, like let's redeem the arts for the sake of the gospel. Like let's honor God with like our efforts in these areas.
Yeah, and I think to some people that might sound like kind of a new or trendy idea, like, oh, church should be into the arts. But if you look at church history, the church for most of the last 2,000 years has really been leading the way in terms of all art, all sorts of art, from music, painting, and beyond. So it's actually not really a totally new thing, but a reclaiming of, hey, the church has a lot to say about art. And we believe that God invented art and God invented beauty. And so as we follow God, we can participate in that as well, redeeming arts for the sake of the gospel.
And I think as Christians too, like we should hold each other to not just hold ourselves, but hold each other to like a kind of a high standard of, creativity and professionalism and like doing the things and being vulnerable and telling the stories and all of that. And I think that can make a big impact on the church as a whole.
Right. I mean, if you open up your Bible and read the very first page, I mean, what's it about? It's God creating. So there's a lot happening in Genesis chapter 1. So I'm not saying that's the only thing that's happening, but we do get a sense in the very first page of the most printed document of all time about the God, the creator of the whole universe, that he is a creative God. And so as we follow him as image bearers of him, I think creativity is a natural outworking of that.
And there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of evil. There's a lot of ugly in the world. And I think us as artists and storytellers, like we can influence that.
Yeah, there's a way Tim Keller used to talk about this, and I won't do it justice, so forgive me. But he used to talk about how beauty can help dispel the brokenness of the world. There's so much brokenness around us that we have to expose ourselves to beauty in order to not get disillusioned with the world around us. And so that's a place that creatives and artists can step in, and that's kind of their own form of ministry, creating beauty that helps us not get so down, because there is darkness and evil and brokenness in the world, but there's also a ton of beauty. And so we want to keep reminding ourselves of that in painting and music and film and photography, whatever it is, to expose ourselves to beautiful things so that we're not disillusioned by the brokenness.
Yeah. And that kind of makes me think about my niece. She's gone through some really tough times in recent years, and she is an incredible artist. And throughout this really dark season for her, that we're like 3 years in, she creates the most beautiful art that I've ever seen. I love it. I'm always encouraging her. It doesn't matter the medium. She could do a little design on her Instagram story and it looks like amazing. She draws, sketches, she colors and paints with my kids. She's just amazing. And it's almost like that's helped her get through some of the dark season, is continuing to create and see and consume beauty. And in her case, she's creating it, So I think that there's so much truth to that, and that's really inspiring. I've always felt like I have to bring a certain level of confidence, maybe pride, arrogance to the set, to the computer, to, leadership, whatever, of like, hey, I know what I'm doing. Don't get in my way, but also I want help. Like that always seems like a difficult balance to strike. How have you balanced that in your, creative and storytelling?
I'm not sure I've achieved the balance. I think if you miss on the like confidence toward arrogance, I probably miss the other way. Honestly, I probably miss towards like humble but self-deprecating, almost not trusting in myself as much as I should. And I'm not saying one miss is better or worse than the other, but it's good to know where you miss. I think there is that fine line of I want to be confident enough where I will put something out there. I will put my best foot forward and see how this goes, but always humble enough to keep learning. I feel like that's the key, is you want to be confident enough to put it out there, but humble enough to keep learning from somebody who's twice your age, half your age, even to keep learning from somebody who's in a completely different industry than you, maybe even keep learning from somebody who was overly critical of your project, but like 5% of what they said was true. And so you have to catch that 5%. So I think that's where the humility part comes in, is to be willing to learn, but also confident enough to step in and to do the courageous thing and to put your creative work out there.
Well, Saul, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Super fun to obviously a lot of our stories are, kind of together and we have shared experiences, but also there's a lot of our adult life that we've like kind of gone different directions. And so that it's interesting to, and inspiring to learn more about all the things that you've done and the books you've read and the experiences you've had. So thanks for coming on and sharing a lot of those. It's been a fun time. Hey, for you guys listening, I hope that you kind of glean some inspiration, some encouragement, some education throughout this conversation. And just remember, story is paramount. We'll see you next time.